This podcast is brought to you by the American Enterprise Institute.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, rate, review, and share.
Thanks for listening. Here's our show.
What in the hell's going on?
What the hell is going on?
What the hell is going on?
I don't know what the hell he's talking about.
You don't have to know what the hell is on it.
What the hell's the matter with these guys?
We don't know what's going on.
What the hell's going on?
Who in God's name knows what it's all about?
Hi, I'm Danielle Pletka.
And I'm Mark Thiessen.
Welcome to our podcast, What the Hell is Going On? 2024. Mark, what the hell is going on?
What the hell is going on? We're still talking about 2023, Danny.
I know. We can't let it go.
It's our first pod of the year. As we do every year, we're going through my annual columns, listing the 10 best and 10 worst things that the President of the United States, in this case Joe Biden, did in 2023. And the Post they ran a couple of days ago online, but the Post put them in print today, and we're still doing our look back on 2023, and maybe he can do better in 2024. What do you think, Danny?
I think that seems kind of unlikely, but hey, let's be optimistic. And let's start with the good news. Tell me the top 10 good things that Joe Biden did in 2023, Mark Thiessen.
This was a challenge to put together. It took more work to come up with the top 10 best than the top 10 worst, but every year I do my best to give the president a fair shot. So we're going to start with the best things he did.
10.
He killed a top Islamic State leader in Syria. In April, U.S. forces launched a strike that took out Khalid Ayad al-Jabouri, who is an Islamic State leader involved in planning attacks on Europe.
Okay, that's good, no?
Yeah, absolutely. Killing ISIS leaders, killing terrorists, always a good thing. You know, it's almost become routine now. We just expect it. Oh, we popped another guy. But we're still carrying out drone strikes, still carrying occasional special operations strikes. Not doing it in Afghanistan anymore because we don't have any boots on the ground over there. But this is the top 10 best things, so I'm not going to go into that.
No, but I do think it's interesting. I mean, it's like there are two Joe Bidens, you know? There's the Joe Biden that, and I know you're going to talk about this later, but there's the Joe Biden that supports Israel. There's the Joe Biden that pops, as you so eloquently say, pops off, you know, terrorist leaders without a single tear of regret. And yet, it's the same guy who pulled out of Afghanistan. I don't really get it. I'll be honest with you.
All right. Well, let's stay in the spirit of being positive. We will have plenty of time to say all the things, the negative things, momentarily. The Joe Biden.
That is not my spirit.
I know it isn't, but we're going to try.
My spirit is not being positive.
Danny, the bit here because Danny does not like being positive as a general rule in life.
No, not about anything. Right. That's true. January is never my best month. All right, go, Mark. Number 9.
9.
He further strengthened restrictions on China's access to advanced technology. So last year, my top 10 list was that the administration blocked U.S. companies from selling chips and semiconductor equipment to China. This year, he further tightened the tech news, banning Americans from investing in Chinese companies developing advanced semiconductors and quantum computers.
That was really good. And I do think it's a sign that even though the administration has been increasingly soft on the Chinese because they're worried about the 2024 election and the economy, nonetheless, they've been willing to recognize that we have got to tighten the noose on the Chinese, technologically speaking. Otherwise, we are going to be in a world of hurt in every single area, not simply economically, but also defense-wise.
You know, the hardest thing with competition with China is that they steal stuff, right? So if you really want to hurt their ability to compete with us, we take steps to prevent them from taking our technology. And because they can't develop it on their own. So anything we can do to tighten the tech noose on Beijing is a good thing.
Fair enough. Keep going.
8.
He hosted the first trilateral summit with South Korea, Japan, and the United States. The Camp David meeting of the three allies was a watershed moment for security in East Asia. As one George W. Bush administration official put it, we could barely get South Korean and Japanese leaders to meet with us in the same room. Biden also continued to strengthen U.S. alliances to counter China in other ways, conducting joint military drills with Japan and Australia in Chinese-claimed areas of the South China Sea, launching the second pillar of his historic agreement with Britain and Australia, known as AUKUS, to jointly develop advanced military capabilities to counter Beijing, holding his third leader-level summit of the Indo-Pacific Quad, which is Japan, Australia, India, and the United States, and conducting a state visit to Hanoi to strengthen our partnership with Vietnam. So generally advancing diplomatic initiatives in the region and military cooperation to counter China. What do you think, Danny? You're in the region. You're coming to us from Australia. How does it feel over there?
Australia is on my list right now because I don't have any internet. So that's why our sound is no good this week. But I will say, I give Kurt Campbell a lot of credit for this. Kurt is the senior Asia guy at the White House, one of the czars, but he's been nominated to be a deputy secretary of state. I think that most of us in Washington are well aware that he's been nominated so that he can be pushed out of the White House. I really hope that he will continue to have the kind of influence that gets this on the top 10 list, because it is an unmitigated good.
Absolutely. And these are, if you combine these last couple of things on the list, it's, he's doing a lot of good stuff in countering China diplomatically, at least.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think this was exactly right to put on your list. Keep going, dude. More good news.
7.
He launched the Replicator Initiative to better compete with China. So it can take a decade or more to put a new weapon system in the hands of warfighters. This is a project that aims to fast-track weapons development and production so the Defense Department can rapidly field thousands of inexpensive, disposable, unmanned systems like swarm drones, with the goal of delivering those new capabilities to U.S. forces in the Indo-Pacific in 18 to 24 months to help counter China's military buildup. I was just in Simi Valley at the Reagan Library for the Reagan Defense Forum, and this was the talk of the Reagan Defense Forum. This is the new buzzword in the defense world, the Replicator Initiative. Everybody was talking about it, and it seems like a good thing.
So I confess to you, I did not know what this was. And of course, when you say replicator, all I can think of is Blade Runner. But it sounds absolutely fascinating, and I'm glad you were able to tell people about it. And again, another good area, and fair enough, it isn't actually that hard. This is the weird schizophrenia of the Biden administration. They have done good things. And it's not a struggle. These are not struggles to compliment for you or for me or for any of us, Mark. The problem is, of course, there are only 10 of them. But keep going.
6.
He provided military aid to Taiwan under a program reserved for sovereign states. So it was an $80 million arms sale, which is not a lot of money, but this mechanism was unprecedented, which is the first ever approved for Taiwan using the Foreign Military Financing Program, which is a program we have that allows partner nations to purchase U.S. defense articles, services, and training through grants and loans. And it's a move that angered Beijing. So another top 10 issue, countering China, defending Taiwan in this case.
Yep, and I still assign credit to a single individual. I probably am elevating Kurt beyond where he should be in giving him credit for all of these things. But there is a theme here, Mark. Notice that it is on Asia that we are often doing good things. I think that's important to understand. All right, anything else?
Here's one that Kurt can't take credit for.
5.
He called Xi Jinping a dictator twice. So in June, Biden called the Chinese leader a dictator, which drew a stinging rebuke from Beijing. And then in November, following the APEC summit in San Francisco, he repeated the charge, calling Xi, quote, a dictator who runs a country that is a communist country that's based on a form of government totally different than ours. While U.S. officials, and I didn't mention him by name, but Tony Blinken, visibly cringed in the audience. Good for him.
I love that visible cringe.
Not for Tony. Not for Tony, for Biden.
Yeah, except for the fact that I think that most of our listeners, not to speak of the entire Biden White House, suspects that the president only said that because he can't control his mouth because, well, he's never been able to control his mouth, but because he's simply past it. So I think that's actually the provenance of that good news. Hey, senility, there's good news here. But hey, you take it where you can get it.
Let me defend Joe Biden on this from, in a very uncomfortable position. But this is also the guy who, and it was on my list last year, 4 different times said we will defend Taiwan, where his aides then went and tried to walk it back. There was an old school where you didn't have to, Ronald Reagan, everyone freaked out that he called the Soviet Union the evil empire. It's like there's an old liberal line, of the Scoop Jackson Democrats who felt perfectly comfortable both engaging an adversary and also calling them what they are, which is tyrants. He seems to have good instincts, at least on being able to say that. And hey, if his filter is down because of age, there's always a silver lining to something that's generally a bad thing for the country and for him.
So we have something to look forward to, at least as the president ages.
Exactly. There you go. The filter is gone. Joe Biden is saying what he thinks and thinking what he says. Anyway, here's one that has nothing to do with foreign policy, Danny.
4,
He signed a GOP bill overturning D.C.'s disastrous changes to its crime code. So at a time when carjackings and burglaries and homicides are completely out of control in the nation's capital, the D.C. Council, in its wisdom, decided to reduce punishments for those crimes. And despite his support for home rule, Biden signed a GOP-led resolution to block those disastrous changes to the D.C. law from taking effect.
Yeah, no, and he got the crap kicked out of him by the left wing of the Democratic Party. So good for him for having done that. It doesn't make life any safer in D.C. because there's still no law enforcement and there's still no prosecutions. D.C. had its worst year of crime in more than a decade in 2023. Nonetheless, this would have made it worse. So thank you, Joe Biden.
If you want to put a less benign spin on it, if he hadn't vetoed that law, he would have owned every murder, every carjacking, every crime in the District of Columbia for now until Election Day. So I think he really didn't have very much of a choice but to do this. But he did it. It's a good thing. So credit to him.
Okay, keep going.
3,
He reached a debt ceiling deal with House Republicans that reduced spending. So in his first 2 years in office, I looked this up. I asked Brian Riedel, who's our friend at the Manhattan Institute, who's probably the best budget numbers cruncher in the conservative movement. And according to Brian, Biden unleashed a miasma of $4.8 trillion in new spending in his first 2 years in office. I mean, that figure is just unfathomable to me. But I'm sorry.
Where's the good news here? Where's the compliment here?
Well, here's the compliment, is that after the first refusing to negotiate with the new House GOP majority, he relented and he signed a debt limit deal that reduced discretionary spending slightly, added welfare work requirements, pared back about $20 billion of his IRS expansion, and ended the pandemic pause on student loan repayments. So I was on Special Report the other day, and they were talking about the do-nothing Republican Congress, and I said, Brett, can I speak in defense of doing nothing? Because what we've been doing for the last 2 years is spending $4.8 trillion. So to the extent that House Republicans did nothing but stop him from spending more, that is a victory.
Amen to that. I only wish that we had a lot more of that. I mean, this is sort of shades of Bill Clinton, and I just wish that the Democratic Party had more shades of Bill Clinton, honestly. I never thought I would say that, but 20 years on, he looks pretty good.
Well, the Jeffrey Epstein logs just came.
Okay.
I'm not so sure how good he looks.
Mark Thiessen always introducing the sordid element of sex into our podcast.
Exactly. Oh, we have 1 million downloads, Danny.
That's why. They're all looking for that. Keep going.
All right.
2,
He continued to stand with Ukraine. So despite the slow rolling of weapons, every year Ukraine is on both my 10 best and 10 worst list. But despite the slow rolling of weapons, Biden provided Ukraine with $68 billion in military assistance so far, without which Russia would have conquered the country. That aid is not only decimating the Russian military threat to NATO, as I put it detailed in a big Washington Post essay this year, it's also creating jobs, it's revitalizing manufacturing communities across the United States and restoring the U.S. capacity to produce weapons for our own defense. And as one senior U.S. official told me, and this is a direct quote, Biden is responsible for killing more Russians than Ronald Reagan.
That's pretty cool. And I'm glad that they're proud of that. If only there were more. If only there were more. But we'll get to that in our bottom 10 list. And you're about to hit number 1, aren't you?
1,
He stood with Israel after the October 7 terrorist attack. So Biden has strongly backed Israel in its battle with Hamas, despite pressure from allies and from his political base. There was a Gallup poll in March that found 49% plurality of Democrats side with the Palestinians, while just 38% support Israel. Biden could face a backlash from Arab American voters he needs to win states like Michigan. Harvard-Harris polling in October pointed out the risk with younger voters, a majority of whom say Hamas's attacks are justified. In December, Harvard-Harris poll found a majority of younger voters say Israel should be ended and given to Hamas and the Palestinians. Biden is that's horrific, but Biden is supporting Israel anyway, despite the fact that his base doesn't want him to, and that takes political courage. Good for him.
I agree, and I agree it belongs in the number one spot. I worry about this, but I try to focus on what Elliot Abrams said to us in that terrific pod that he did with us, which is, yep, you're going to hear a lot of rhetoric, you're going to hear a lot of sound and fury, but the bottom line is that the Israelis aren't reporting that the Biden administration is telling them anything serious about stopping their offensive against Hamas in private. And good for Joe Biden, because I think you and I know just how hard this position is for him.
Well, that was going to be on my top 10 worst until we talked to Elliot, and he made that point, and I thought to myself, you know what? Why not just give him a clean win? Because they haven't really pushed them in any coercive way to do that. You don't hear the Israelis complaining about it, even through back channels. And so, this is, I think, so far, a clean positive for Joe Biden.
Now to my sweet spot, the glass half empty.
Nope, Danny, hold on.
You've got bonuses here?
I've got bonuses on both of them. I have bonuses. So here's the near achievement that gets an honorable mention because it was thwarted by no fault of Joe Biden's. Biden brought us tantalizingly close to a Saudi-Israeli peace deal, only to see it disrupted by Hamas's attack. But that assault by Iran's terrorist proxy will only serve to increase Arab resolve to make peace with Israel as a military bulwark against Iran, once conditions in the region permit. And please, everyone, when you get to this part of the column, if you read it online, click to the link at the end, because producer Clara has an outstanding article, which I link to, on why Arab-Israeli peace has a strong future. Once the conditions in the region permit.
Amen to that. Bonus for us, bonus for Clara.
Absolutely. Do you think that's true? Do you think that this is going to resume once conditions permit?
I do, but I don't know when that sort of ephemeral conditions permit actually will happen. And I think that's going to be the very hard part of this, is when do people feel like they've gone enough back to normal that they can do what they fully intend to do, which is to ultimately make peace with Israel. I hope it's sooner rather than later, but I worry that it won't be.
And that's also, I said this in the podcast with Elliot, but it's worth repeating. The reason that is happening is because of the Iraq War. Because the Arab world depended on Saddam Hussein, that stable genius of the Middle East, as the bulwark against Iran. And now Saddam Hussein is gone. And so who is the only military power in the region outside the United States who can be a bulwark against Iran? It's Israel. And that is the ultimate reason why they've all decided to make peace with Israel, is because they need Israel. They need a nuclear power. They need a powerful military that is willing to whack, as they did recently, apparently, Quds Force leaders and push back on Iranian action in the region. The only country that can do that now is Israel, because Saddam is gone. So thank goodness, as George W. Bush always said, the world is better off without Saddam Hussein.
Well, yes, it is. There's no question.
Okay, enough of the neocon. And then everyone always accuses me of being a neocon. I'm not a neocon. I'm just a con, right? It used to be you could just be a conservative and be American leadership. But apparently nowadays, if you support bold American leadership on the world stage, you are a neocon. But anyway, enough. That's a digression. Enough of that. So there's one achievement that should be on this list that is not. We reached the end of the year without a deal on fundamental changes in border security in exchange for new military aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. The fact that we let the year go without the Biden administration cutting that deal with House and Senate Republicans is shameful. I believe that this is a win-win when it happens, because the biggest argument that the anti-Ukraine right makes is Joe Biden cares more about Ukraine's borders than our own. And you know what? The problem with it is it's true. He does care more about Ukraine's borders than our own. We can care about both. We can secure our own border without and also lead on the world stage, because we're a superpower. Again, more neocon. But the idea that we can't do that is ridiculous. And we, to the extent that Republicans are using this issue to force the Biden administration to do something on border security, good for them. It'll be a win-win when it happens. Well, if it doesn't happen, it's because Biden cares more about. Then it proves the anti-Ukraine folks right. It proves that Joe Biden cares more about securing Ukraine's border than he does our own. Oh, I'm going to get into it in the worst list, so I won't go into the numbers right now. But I mean, the situation on the southern border is absolute catastrophe. Just since the end of the fiscal year, we had more than 300,000 border encounters last month, which is the most in the history of the country. You know, it's just an outrage. And so, anyway, let's get to the outrages. All right, so the top 10 worst things that Joe Biden did in 2023.
10.
He made the child care crisis worse. So, you know, listeners of our pod know my Post colleague Alyssa Rosenberg and I came on the pod. We did a big essay in the Post in September talking about ways that we can improve child care. And the child care costs in this country have been rising at nearly twice the rate of inflation. And one of the things we proposed was expanding the State Department's au pair program, which I know you're familiar with, Danny, and making that low-cost option available for more families. Well, instead, the Biden administration put forward a plan that would double the cost of hiring an au pair by tying compensation to state and local laws on minimum wage, also taking away some of the flexibility that parents have in terms of compensation and hours worked and all the rest of it. And that will effectively put the program out of reach for many working families. You're an au pair family, Danny. Tell me what you think.
So, I mean, we haven't had an au pair in many years, but this is a wonderful program. I mean, it's a wonderful program for kids. It's a wonderful program for our culture. It's a wonderful way to welcome young people from foreign countries who are interested without making too much of a commitment to them. But what I think you may not know is that Biden is following always a great leader in our nation, always the state that you wish to emulate. If it can't be California, it ought to be Massachusetts, where they put this law into place a couple of years ago and effectively drummed most families out of the au pair program because it became so expensive to have an au pair at their exorbitant minimum wage rates. And they limited the ability of families to deduct costs. You know, they host and feed and pay for insurance and pay for gas for these mostly girls who come. And Massachusetts also limited the amount you could deduct for them. So, yeah, that's basically the end of that program. You can all go back to paying, $25 an hour for a babysitter from the local high school. It's anti-family. But then again, I mean, that is this administration, anti-family.
9.
He made us more dependent on Russian uranium. So we talk a lot about our dependence on foreign countries for fossil fuels and what Biden did to reverse our energy independence. But he's also making it harder for us to get uranium for nuclear power. So Biden wants to speed our transition from fossil fuels to electricity. I think that's insane. But if he wants to do it, guess what? We need nuclear power because nuclear power is clean, green, and safe. And yet he just restricted development of over 1 million acres of land that includes the only U.S. source of high-grade uranium ore. What that means is the United States right now is the largest purchaser of uranium from, guess where? Russia. And the move increases our dependence on Russia at a time when we're trying to isolate Vladimir Putin for his invasion of Ukraine. It's insane.
A lot of people don't pay attention to this stuff, and that's one of the reasons why I like these lists. I think everybody's saying to themselves, why do we have to listen so much to Mark? He's the so much less interesting member of this team. And yet, Mark, what I say to myself is, you've done a heck of a good job here. Self, I say, you've done a great job here. No, this is something we don't talk about enough. And these are the kinds of decisions that most Americans say, oh, yay, we're protecting the land, we're protecting whatever particular species the administration has picked as its pet of the year. And the reality is this has major implications, not simply for our national security, but also for our environmental security. So good for you, Mark. You found a nugget.
We have environmental security? I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, listen, I mean, if you want nuclear power because you think it's more environmentally friendly than buying solar panels from China, if you think it's more environmentally friendly than those bird-killing eyesore windmills that everybody seems to love, if you think it's more environmentally friendly than so many of the other stupid measures like electric car subsidies, then in fact, these are real things.
Yeah. Well,
That's
you
not
can't.
about nuclear is in fact the solution to everybody's fears about climate change. We just don't want to embrace it.
No, it's
But
exactly.
that's a different rant.
It is, absolutely. Look, I'm against the transition from fossil fuels. I think we need more fossil fuels. I want to drill, baby, drill for all of them. But you can't at the same time be a climate change fanatic and say we need to go electric on everything, even though our power grid can't handle it. And apparently, there was an article that shows that if your electric car goes on fire, the best thing to do is let it burn, because you can't put it out. But if you want burning cars along the side of the road that don't go out, and our power grid going down because everybody's using electric cars, you got to be for nuclear energy, and you got to be for domestic production of nuclear ore. So anyway, all right.
8,
He circumvented the Supreme Court on student loan forgiveness. So last year, with a stroke of his pen,
I'm sorry. This is such an outrage. This is just such an outrage. I can't even let you speak. And this makes me so mad.
Okay, good. Thank you for sharing that, Danny. So let me tell people what he did, and then you can rant. All right. So last year, with the stroke of his pen, Biden tried to cancel $500 billion in student debt, only to have his unconstitutional plan blocked by the Supreme Court. So he used other regulatory means to write off $132 billion in student debt anyway, which is effectively forcing blue-collar workers to subsidize the higher education of white-collar professionals and launching a frontal assault on Congress's power of the purse. Danny, go.
This is such an outrage. And I think the person who said to us, I can't remember who it was anymore, who said to us that every single one of the president's lawyers said he couldn't do this. Every single one. His political appointees, his bureaucrats all said you can't do this. But then Lawrence Tribe of course, Harvard University came in and said, no, this is totally cool. You can totally do it. And he was like, see, Larry knows what I can do. And he's still violating U.S. law. He's still robbing the poor. We've talked about this so many times. Robbing the janitor in the doctor's office to pay the doctor's student loans. It makes me sick.
Yeah, it's just the idea that that you can take out a loan and then not pay it back. You know what it does? It punishes the responsible American. So there are so many people who who would love to go to Harvard, but decide instead to go to state school because that's more affordable, or they work a campus job to pay off their bills so they don't take on a lot of student debt. Or maybe they go, Virginia has this great program where if you do 2 years at Nova, the Northern Virginia Community College, and you keep a good grade after GPA, you get automatic admission into UVA, which is one of the most prestigious universities in the country. There's so many options. Our old boss, Arthur Brooks, wrote about his 5K BA. He did a correspondence degree at Thomas Edison University. There are so many options to get a college education that don't involve taking on $500,000 in student debt. And people who make irresponsible decisions are asking people who made responsible decisions to bail them out and pay their debt for them. And that seems to be the way this generation goes.
See, I'm not the only one who knows how to rant. Keep going.
Okay. Here, we're going to tee up Danny for another rant here.
7,
He failed to police anti-Semitism on the left. So when Biden declared his candidacy for president in 2019, he produced a video where he started, the first two words were Charlottesville, Virginia, and he condemned the right-wing bigots in Charlottesville, quote, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 1930s. Well, guess what? The same anti-Semitic bile is coming from the left right now on college campuses, on Capitol Hill and other places after the October 7th terrorist attack on Israel, and Joe Biden has not confronted that. They have not kicked Rashida Tlaib out of Congress. This anti-Semitism is exploded on the left. And the Democrats are, just trying to duck and pretend it's not happening when they made a huge deal of the neo-Nazis marching in Charlottesville. I think it's total hypocrisy.
It is total hypocrisy. I can't even rant about it. I remain speechless. I remain speechless that it took more than a month to get rid of that vile anti-Semite Claudine Gay at Harvard University. So I still can't believe the administration put out a policy on Islamophobia in response to the explosion of anti-Semitism. We've talked about this a lot, Mark. Our listeners know what I think. And believe me, I haven't stopped.
Excellent. All right.
6.
He allowed a Chinese spy balloon to violate U.S. airspace. So for days, the administration did nothing while this 20-story Chinese craft, approached the United States across the Pacific. They saw it coming, came across U.S. land, and then somebody in Montana looked up at the sky and said, "What the hell is that?" And then told the media. And then, even then, they let it keep going. And even Democrats, including Leon Panetta, John Tester, and others, called the president out for letting it sail across the country for a week, collecting intelligence before finally shooting it down over the Atlantic.
You know what? I think the real issue here is that Chinese spy balloon is the tip of the iceberg. I think that this administration, and probably others too, have gotten so used to the Chinese being up in our grill that they just tolerate it. They now think it's just business as usual. You know what? You're stealing our intellectual property. You're stealing our social security number. You're stealing our national health records. You're floating spy balloons over our country using, by the way, American internet service providers to hook up and spy on us. Hey, you know what? I mean, all I can tell you is I'm sure there's much worse out there. I just can't wait to hear what it is.
Yeah, it's Biden is just the hallmark of Biden's foreign policy is fear of escalation. So whether Donald Trump or any Republican president would have done when they saw that thing coming, it's an unmanned craft. Shoot it down over the Pacific. You don't let a spy balloon cross over. But Joe Biden wrings his hands and thinks, oh no, that could be escalation. We could cause a crisis with China. It's the same reason why he won't give long-range missiles to Ukraine. Oh no, it could cause escalation with Russia. It's the same reason why he doesn't, respond to Iran's provocations, which we're about to get to. Oh no, it could start a regional war. He's so afraid of his own shadow. And what he doesn't understand is the way you deter China is by not being afraid to shoot down their frigging unmanned spy balloon.
Yeah, it's not complicated. You've got your finger on the pulse of Joe Biden. He's afraid of everything. I agree.
5.
He allowed Iran to attack U.S. forces with impunity. So, okay, your favorite president, Donald Trump, Danny, drew a clear red line with Iran's leaders. He warned Iran's leaders that the United States would respond militarily against Iran if Iran or its terrorist proxies killed a single American. And he enforced it by taking out Iran's terrorist mastermind Qasem Soleimani in 2020. Well, on October 7th, Iran, its proxy, Hamas, killed more than 30 Americans during its attack on Israel. And since then, Iran's terrorist proxies have carried out more than 100 attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq, in Syria, in the Red Sea. And Biden has imposed no cost on Iran whatsoever. That sends a message of weakness, and it invites more attacks.
I can't add anything to that. That's exactly what's going on. And we just pulled a carrier battle group out of the region. I know there were other reasons for us to have to do it, but it sends a message to the Iraq.
You don't have enough carrier battle group?
Well, as you and I know all too well, we actually don't. This particular group was coming to the end of its deployment, but I think the message that it sends to Hezbollah, to the Iranians, to the Houthis is unmissable, and that is, we will tolerate your attacks on us. We will tolerate your murder of American citizens. We will tolerate your attacks on U.S. troops in Iraq. That's the Biden administration message, and unfortunately, I think the Iranians are getting it loud and clear.
4.
He allowed the worst border crisis in U.S. history to get even worse. So in fiscal 2023, the record for the most encounters on the southern border was broken for a third year in a row. Every year as president, Joe Biden has broken the record for the most encounters at the southern border. Just before Christmas, there were more than 12,600 migrant encounters in a single day, the highest total ever recorded. Just to put this in context, Jay Johnson, who was the Secretary of Homeland Security under the Obama administration, said if we faced 1,000 border encounters in a day, it would be a crisis that would overwhelm the system. 12,600 in a single day. Wall Street Journal poll found 64% of Americans disapprove of Biden's border policies, while just 27% approve. This is just a absolute debacle. And quite frankly, Danny, it's a crisis of choice. Because you know what? Joe Biden has the same laws on the books that Donald Trump and Barack Obama had, and they secured the border. People forget this, but people called Obama the deporter-in-chief because he deported so many people. And here's Joe Biden not enforcing the laws. It's great that Congress is trying to force him to do it, but it's not a matter of money. It's not a matter of he needs any more authorities. He has the same laws on the books that Trump and Obama did, and they secured the border. Why can't Joe Biden do it?
I have no damn idea. This would be, frankly, a saving grace for his administration. Democrats are privately, as you and I heard, as much up in arms about this as Republicans. We've got sanctuary city governors and mayors hysterical about the influx of illegal aliens. A country is defined by its borders. I will be honest with you. I actually just don't get this.
It's mind-boggling to me. And also, you know what? A couple things. One, if everyone remembers, we had Brian Fitzpatrick on the podcast, and one of the things he said to us, which just has stuck with me, and I've repeated it to anyone who will listen, is that he says on the floor of the House, Republicans come up to him and say, I can't vote for aid for Ukraine, but I hope it passes. And Democrats come up to him and say, I can't vote for border security, but I hope it passes. It's like, do your jobs, folks. Good Lord.
Yeah, no, you're right. 100%. 100%.
3.
He blocked allies from giving Ukraine a clear path to NATO membership. So at the July summit in Vilnius, a majority of NATO allies wanted to set a specific timetable for Kyiv's admission to the alliance, but Biden rejected their entreaties out of fear of, guess what, provoking Russia, and gave Putin a major victory. It's the same flawed reasoning that leads Biden to withhold critical weapons from Ukraine. Joe Biden is just afraid of his shadow on this stuff.
Yep. And no different. Look, people listening to us can see a pattern of fear, of timidity, of an unwillingness to cross his far left flank or to cross his young, gun lefty advisors inside the White House. And the testament is that when Joe Biden has courage, like he does on Israel, like he did when he got rid of the ISIS leader, he does well. And when he is ruled by fear, all of America loses. It's as simple as that. That's the lesson here.
Absolutely. And look, Steve Began and I had a big essay in the Post this year around the Vilnius summit explaining why the only way you end this war is by bringing Ukraine into NATO. Because look, if let's say Ukraine isn't able to take back all of its territory, Zelensky will have to decide how much territory he's taken back and whether he can sue for peace or not. The only way that's not going to be a repeat of 2014, where the Russians invaded and took some territory and then paused and then started up again, is because that's what the Russians will do. They'll take any peace agreement as a pause, not as a peace agreement. They'll rebuild their military, they'll rearm, and then they'll go for the rest of it in a few years' time. The only way you do stop that is by drawing a line, just like we did during 60 years of the Cold War on the Fulda Gap, and saying this line you will not cross. Now, if you attack the rest of Ukraine, it's a part of NATO, you're at war with us. That's the only way you have lasting peace that doesn't involve a complete and total defeat for Russia and Ukraine. So I don't know when Ukraine's going to get to that point, but the only way you end this war and not have another one in Ukraine is by bringing Ukraine into NATO.
Amen.
Number 2, he continued to slow roll weapons to Ukraine. So Ukraine was one of my top best things that he did, but it's also one of the worst things he did. So after resisting for nearly a year, Biden finally agreed in January to provide Ukraine with M1 Abrams tanks, but the first tanks didn't arrive until September. The counteroffensive started in the spring, but it was not until the fall that the first tanks arrived. After 19 months of Ukrainian pleading, Biden finally provided Kyiv with ATACMS, which are Army Tactical Missile Systems, in October, but we only gave them a few. And we only gave them medium-range missiles, which travel 100 miles, instead of the long-range missiles that have 190-mile range. And after denying Ukraine's begging for F-16 fighters for more than a year, Biden finally reversed course in May, but we had training delays, and that they still haven't been deployed. And then he provided Kyiv with just 3 Patriot air defense systems, which leaves Ukrainian troops and schools and homes and hospitals and critical infrastructure exposed to Russian attacks. Biden's delays have undermined Ukraine's counteroffensive. They prolonged the war, and they've weakened support in Congress for military aid to Ukraine because people look at it and say, he doesn't have a strategy to win. And they're right.
That's correct. He doesn't. And, look, we've talked about this innumerable times. This is easy, it's obvious, and all it takes is courage. And, the desire to merely stop Russia from winning rather than to enable Ukraine's victory it will go down in history for Joe Biden. It won't be an asterisk. It will be the stain on his administration that he deserves.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't understand. You would think, just out of a political, calculus, wouldn't you want to have a victory a clear victory in Ukraine going into the 2024 elections? The fact is, the polls show that the vast majority of Americans disapprove of his Ukraine policy, not because he's doing too much, because he's doing too little, because they don't think he has a strategy for victory. You would think he'd want to have a victory. But again, I think, if there's a theme that's going through this, is Joe Biden is afraid of escalation. And I think he thinks that a clear Ukrainian victory would be escalatory. He doesn't want Ukraine to actually win decisively because he thinks that, oh no, Putin may escalate if he's pushed into a corner. So let's just give them enough weapons to keep Putin at bay, but not enough weapons to decisively win this. And I can tell you, I spoke to a very senior Ukrainian official who was visiting Washington recently, and he told me that if he had ATACMS and about 5 Patriot batteries, the Ukrainians could absolutely decimate the Russian fleet. They could drive them out of Crimea. And you can tell, quite frankly, the British gave them Storm Shadows, which are their equivalent of the long-range ATACMS. The French gave them their version of it, and they used that to win the Battle of the Black Sea. They actually drove Russian ships out of the Black Sea back into Russian territory, and that opened up the ability to send grain and to send iron ore and to restore shipping. It's like that was just a handful of missiles from Britain and France. Imagine if we gave them our long-range missiles and gave them the capability to do that, not just in Crimea, not just in the Black Sea, but across the entire front where Russian forces have taken territory. It just boggles the mind that we won't give them the weapons they need to win.
So what's worse than this, Mark?
1,
He announced he's running for re-election. That is worse. So Joe Biden, I check every day the 538 average, which is a great website because it not only gives you the polling average, but it gives you can plug in the current day of the Biden presidency and compare his approval rating to every president in the history of polling going back to Harry Truman. And Joe Biden is the single most unpopular president since the end of World War II. Nobody compares. Trump close, but he's now even more unpopular than Trump. I used to have to say, with the exception of Jimmy Carter, he's now 11 points less popular than Jimmy Carter was when he was running for re-election against Ronald Reagan, and we all know what happened there. In October, 76% of Americans said that he is too old to serve a second term. CNN polling found that 67% of Democrats want someone else to be their party's nominee, yet he is running. And he's forcing a Biden-Trump rematch that the supermajorities of Americans say they don't want, and that makes a second Trump term all the more likely.
Okay, so Mark, what do you say to the idea, though, that in fact, if we didn't have Joe Biden, we would have someone even further left, even worse? After all, the choice in the Democratic Party is not between normal and far left. It's between left and very very, very far left. The Democratic Party isn't the party that we once knew. So Why are we so mad at Joe Biden for saving us from AOC and Kamala Harris and Rashida Tlaib and all the rest of them?
Have you been listening to this list? I mean, the list of bad stuff that's going on. I mean, it could get worse. Yeah, I mean,
It could get
Lord,
worse.
The reason
It will get worse.
Well, it could get worse. But, Joe Biden is the worst president in my lifetime. I mean, he's worse than Jimmy Carter. He is the most disastrous president we've ever had. And I will tell you that the only reason Joe Biden is president, to make your point, is because they couldn't find anybody else who was electable. I mean, they were heading towards Bernie Sanders as the nominee until the Democrats, in their wisdom, because they're actually played politics as a team sport, they said, oh my God, Bernie Sanders is going to be the nominee. We need to nominate Joe Biden, who's barely compass mentis, and send him in the basement to run against Trump because he's the only one who can win. So yeah, they could go off and they could nominate somebody like Gavin Newsom or one of these left-wing lunatics, and they're going to lose the election if they do that. So, they don't have the reason they nominated him is because he's the only one, not because he was more moderate, is because they knew the only person the Democrats Americans would elect was someone who is moderate. And guess what? He ended up not being that damn moderate. He ended up not being the guy he told the American people he would be, the president who brought America together, because Donald Trump screwed up so badly in 2020 that he not only lost the presidency, he lost us the Senate. And when they won the Senate, Joe Biden got visions in his eyes of being the next FDR and started passing trillions of dollars in spending, which unleashed the worst inflation in 40 years.
Oh, dude, shut up. You're depressing me. Stop.
If he had been the moderate president he promised to be, he would be cruising to re-election right now. I don't know. If either party figured out that if we just nominate somebody else, we're going to win, then the first person to realize that Americans don't want a Trump-Biden rematch and nominate somebody else is going to win the 2024 election. But I don't think anybody's going to figure that out.
No one's going to figure it out. This is what we deserve. We can't have nice things anymore. On the other hand, I want to end this thoroughly depressing.
We've got the dishonorable mentions.
Oh my God. Jeez Louise, Mark, go ahead.
All right. So it is very hard for me to come up with just 10 for the worst things that Joe Biden did every year. So every year I have the dishonorable mentions. So I'll just go through them really quickly. Biden canceled the 7 remaining oil gas leases in Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. He transferred $6 billion in frozen oil funds to Iran as ransom for 5 American hostages. He announced the most draconian restrictions on auto emissions ever in an effort to try and force American automakers to transition to electric vehicles. He nominated judges who couldn't answer basic questions about the Constitution, and he embraced Bidenomics, even though only 14% of Americans say they've been helped by Biden's economic policies. Those are the ones that didn't make the list. And I could have gone on for a long time, but I only had 900 words.
Well, that's what the rest of our year is for. Can we just have one little footnote of great news?
Yes. What's the great news?
Claudine Gay out at Harvard University. You're right. It wasn't because of her anti-Semitism. It's because she was a serial plagiarist. On the other hand, what a good way to start the year. I'm hopeful. I am hopeful.
They replaced her with. That is a sick institution, and it's not just her that's the problem. That is a culture that's
yes.
really bad over there. So let's hope they get it fixed. I've got a nominee to replace her.
Who's that?
Arthur Brooks. If you wanted to send a sign that you're changing course and that you're going to actually make yourself a serious institution, Arthur Brooks for president.
There you go. Right. Of Harvard, of course. Of Harvard. Yes. Well, it is a sick institution. But I have to say, on this, I'm a glass half full girl because I'm really hopeful. Maybe this is the beginning of good things happening in 2024. We need the good things. It's not.
It's not. There are no good things happening in 2024, Danny.
Hey, folks, let us know what you think of Mark's top 10, bottom 10, and of anything else. We're going to talk about all of these things and much, much more. We've got a great lineup already for the rest of the year, and we're super grateful to you for being here. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody. We'll see you next week. Let us know what topics you'd like us to cover. You can get in touch with the show by emailing us at whatthehell@aei.org.
Or you can reach us on Twitter. I'm at @dpletka.
And I'm at Mark Thiessen. That's Mark with a C.
Please rate and review the podcast. If you like the show, please subscribe, share it, comment on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this.
Thanks for listening.